Hello everyone, I'm Shagunat Wana. I'm pursuing medicine from Delhi. So I read this book called Chariots of God by Eric von Däniken, and he said something about the early men, the first men, having contact with aliens. Well, those can be biological entities or they might be robots too. So what is your take on history reflecting on robotics? And that's it.
Yeah, so funnily enough, Chariots of God is a book that I read when I was a kid as well. I had on that book, there's an illustration of the Nazca lines in Peru. So I was fascinated with that, and that was one of my bucket lists to-do list when I found that when I was really young, this is I would say just in 11th to 12th in my schooling time. Surprisingly, and I think maybe this is something that's back of mind all the time. So when I was in LA, I decided to make a trip to Peru to literally do that. So fly over the Nazca lines. So not just the Nazca lines, there's a candelabra that was also formed. It's a big shaped, candle holder. So me and my wife, we actually took a trip to Peru, did a hike up Machu Picchu, and had a look at the Nazca lines. So it was fascinating. So coming back to the question of robots and alternate life for other planets, and potentially the robots collaborating with other robots. So I have really I'm not an expert in speculating the possibility of life or robotic life or biological life or other planets. I think NASA are doing a great job in exploring that with the Sethu program to do that. But really, I think the question of whether you could have purely non-biological civilization is a very fascinating one for me. In other words, can we have
Transformers?
Yeah, well, not Transformers, but it's more. Can we sustain? Is there a way of sustaining a civilization which is non-biological, purely robots creating a society and working with each other? And that nicely reflects on some of the work that we are doing on something called cobots or co-working robots. And so this is about robots, primarily about robots and humans working together in factory floors, in warehousing situations. So Amazon uses a lot of robots to move their goods around. But it's more about creating capabilities where we have a seamless collaboration between robots and humans, robots and other robots, and humans. So we want to create a fluid space. We want to create the technology that allows a fluid space which we can seamlessly. So, for example, if I'm trying to lift a heavy load, and typically if you've got co-workers, you would kind of hand it over to this person. You would share the load and put things together. That happens quite seamlessly. So the question is, can we create a scenario where robots and robots collaborate to do something that an individual robot cannot do? For example, lifting heavy weights and manipulating things. Can robots and humans work together so that there are some scientific challenges like human intention detection. When you start getting up and walking towards me, we as a social being have certain intuition and certain social norms to guess what is your intention in doing that, and we would respond appropriately. Shake your hand or hand you some stuff. So similar things can be equipped robotic systems to do intention prediction, use machine learning to be able to learn from experience and act seamlessly so that the robot-human interaction happens naturally. So that is fascinating from my perspective, and I think could lead, if we get it all right, it could lead to a robotic civilization which can coexist and develop and evolve. Who knows?
Okay. Third question, can you?
Hi, my name is Arun Mishra. I'm studying in 12th grade. So my question is that what type of technology that you guys are using to get to search for a new life or extraterrestrial life or getting people to Mars, some other planet?
Okay. So I must add that Aryan has a claim to fame that he's a TEDx speaker himself, and
He discovered
an asteroid. So well done on that. So I'm equally honored to meet you in terms of young minds, curious minds, very important. Going back to the question on the search for planetary life or settlement on an alternate planet. So maybe I can tell you a little bit more about the NASA project that we have. We haven't talked about that. So Rob Ambrose, one of the heads of the robotics division in NASA, recently said, NASA's mission is to potentially make ourselves a two-planetary species for various reasons, for reasons of economics, for reasons of problems or issues that we may face in Earth in the future, for climate change, for issues that we may face due to the health of the aging population that may benefit from living on an alternate planet. Who knows? So we are exploring. We're making sure we have options open in some sense. So those of you who have watched the movie Martian, that movie is very well shot, I must say. Matt Damon does a good job, but not just that. I love him as an actor, but not just that. But it's fairly accurate reflection of the challenges that you would face on the surface of Mars in terms of growing food, in terms of finding, creating oxygen that's breathable, dealing with radiation, dealing with communication delays with the base planet,
storms,
Martian storms. Challenges with the topsoil, dealing with extremes of temperatures. So all of these things are relevant challenges, and so one of the projects that we're doing with the Johnson Space Center is about creating unmanned robotics pre-deployment missions to Mars, so that we can de-risk technology. We can send missions that are maybe 4 to 5 times cheaper than a manned mission, because you don't have to build in as much redundancy into the system as for a manned mission, and also being able to do this in an efficient fashion, so that you can really pre-deploy assets on the surface before the astronaut arrives, so that you can really maximize the time spent on the surface initially to really explore things that only humans can do. You're not doing all the sort of preparatory stuff and assembly and all that kind of stuff. So again, Rob Ambrose, he recently said in one of his talks that if Columbus were to redo his mission to discover America, he might have done it in a slightly different way. He might have sent instead of carrying all his stuff in 3 ships and then landing on trying to find America, he might have pre-deployed containers to find in the search for America. The only problem was, at that point, he would have had the problem of answering the question of, one, where is America, and second, what is a container wagon? So in a way, he kind of motivates this notion of using humanoids to pre-deploy assets, so that we can really, first of all, do a kind of feasibility study without putting humans at risk for this kind of settlement. So we are developing technologies we're developing robots of different form factors. So somebody asked me, you have this Valkyrie humanoid robot, 6 feet, 125 kilograms tall, electrically actuated, lots of sensors. Are you going to get the robot to walk on the surface of Mars, which is very rubbly, very, So actually, we are not. We're not going to get that robot is not for walking on the surface of Mars. It is for operating inside a habitat built for humans on Mars. There are other robots. There are wheeled robots. There are quadruped robots. There are other structures that we're building for navigation and exploration on the surface of Mars. So some of the technologies there are already mature, if you're aware, the JPL in Caltech, for example, works a lot on the Mars rover technologies and quadruped navigation technologies. But we are focusing very much on dexterous manipulation on humanoids for co-assisting astronauts on ISS, on the space mission. And for that, the key element is we have to build in significant autonomy into this platform, because as you know, a signal from Earth to go to Mars and come back takes 15 minutes or so one way in some sense. And so teleoperating a robot is not an option. You have to build in significant autonomy. You can still give high-level missions, say that grasp this thing, open a door. Those kind of things are okay, but you cannot joystick a robot because of this delay. And that is why we are developing technologies that increase autonomy on these systems significantly.
Great. And Valkyrie happens to be your favorite robot. I remember that in the book.
It does. It's given me a lot of sleepless nights. I cry a lot sometimes. My students cry a lot. They miss their birthdays, but still it is my favorite robot. Yes.
The last question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm
Do you want to turn it around?
No,
that's fine.
Of course. You want to see the person who is answering the question, of course.
Okay. So my name is Gunjan and I'm a visual artist. And my question is that what do you think about the role of art in robotics and the role of robotics in art? Because these days you must be, seeing that most of the artists in the contemporary art world, they're taking help and, experimenting with the robots, machines and computers. So, and is there any kind of experimental space where artists and scientists can work together or, exploring that side to create new visuals, basically?
Great question. So I think I must admit, to start off, a disclaimer that I am probably the worst artist in the world. I am not very skilled. I used to paint a little bit, but otherwise I'm kind of a bit tone deaf, and so my family compensated for that. I've got two little girls. One's a brilliant violin player, and she does Bharatanatyam dance. She's been learning since she was 3 years old. She performs the Edinburgh Fringe, so she's now 12 and 13. Turned 13, sorry. I'll be
listen to this.
That'll be terrible. Yeah, and I've got a 9-year-old who's a brilliant clarinet player. So she's learning to play, and my wife plays the arena as well. So I think art is a great it's something that is essential in our life. I do enjoy music and art. So going back to the question of robotics and art, as I mentioned briefly early on, we have started a new initiative called Design Informatics, which brings together people who care about aesthetics, design, architecture, music, the digital aspects of those things, and looks at some interesting algorithms, solutions from machine learning that can enhance the artistic presentation. So, as you know, algorithms are one extreme of creativity. They're very sort of precise, accurate. Art and creativity is the other end of the spectrum. But we're finding common grounds where these two things can work together to create interesting installations and pieces. I forget So we actually have. I'm not sure if it's still online. We used to have in Edinburgh a very interesting piece of musical instrument which was connected to the internet. You could tweet to it. You could. It was a combination of organ and sort of drums and some players, and it was developed by a professor in the School of Philosophy who worked closely with us, and that robot, that piece of musical instrument was connected to the internet. You could tweet to it, you could talk to it, it would have its own emotions, and it would tweet back. And so it recently won, maybe 3 years ago, it won the BAFTA. So I'm sure you'll be able to find it. So that's an example of connected networks and robotics working together with music. There's another interesting example. So in Zurich, I think it's at ETH, but I may be wrong, but they have they've been using robots and robotic devices to create art installations. So these are structures which are very complicated. So typically when you build a house, you have straight walls and right angle corners because it's easy to do it. It's easy to maintain straight lines and to measure things, make sure it's accurate. But once you get robotic devices that actually compute and lay things precisely like a bricklaying robot or something like that, there's nothing preventing you from building buildings that look like a wave, that look very smooth, that look very circular, because you are taking away the restriction of having to use a plumb line to actually get it right. So there are examples of now installations of building stuff which follow very complex things that you design in some sort of your favorite illustrator 3D designing thing with very complex curves, very complex hand drawn structures, and then you get a robot to build it, either 3D print it or use bricks and lay things out. So those are areas where already I think art and robotics is already playing a big part. And these days, as I mentioned also briefly earlier, aesthetics and design are very important parts of robotics because you need those kind of the right skills to build the right form factor for aesthetics and ergonomics. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have anything more to add in this area, but you are the expert.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. I think that's fantastic narration. I think you're good at art. I should say interested. So I think as we come to a close to this 4-segment session, the last segment it was, I would like to thank you on behalf of our entire Kalam Center, also on behalf of all the audience who are present here and who are present online. I'm sure they had a very knowledgeable session. They learned something from you. And I think personally, I must say that we are so proud of you that as an Indian, I see you in BBC, I see you in many other places. And it's fantastic to have an Indian person who shares Indian roots, Indian education, and has produced such a fantastic man of the future, as Dr. Kalam would say, man of the future. So I'm sure with the mission, what is your mission? We all know that. And you continue, moving on your mission. And congratulations once again for the expansion of the center. I'd love to see it again. And I'm sure, if there's something where even online, our children out here could witness the work which you do out there, we would love to have that interface built, because a lot of children would get so inspired by seeing what you are and your own story. So once again, thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, and I must add that I've been impressed with what you guys have been doing, setting up, continuing this vision of Dr. Kalam, and I wish you guys lots and lots of success and onwards and upwards.
Thank you. We'll stay in touch and we'll keep with this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.